What does it mean to be a winner? It's a question that's plagued basketball debates for the better part of the last decade, with the rise of social media and high school hoops sensations birthing a wave of animosity for a new era of hoops influencer that's captivated the minds of youth basketball players everywhere and infuriated purists who believe the bright lights and flashy highlights only encourage bad habits that have degraded the quality of the game today. But alongside Jalen Green, no player has been the poster child more for the talented loser than Lamelo Ball, whose hot start to the season has once again reignited the debate about how or even if he can be a winning player, and what it means for us to still be asking these questions as he enters year 6 of his career. But a closer look at the timeline of Lamelo and the repeated roadblocks that have derailed the Hornets' attempts at contending reveal a consistent pattern of high-level play and promise being cut short by a host of injuries, trades, and off-court controversies that have come together to paint the model example of a non-winning player in the modern NBA. So let's talk about Lamelo Ball, his failure to contend year over year, and discover how you build the NBA's flashiest loser. With the level of hype and praise that Lamelo entered the league with, while it's not really necessary to cover his draft scouting report or who exactly he was, it is important to understand how mediocre of an organization he was joining to set the stage for just how much he'd impact them in year 1. Prior to Ball's arrival, the 2019-20 Hornets were one of a multitude of teams whose true mediocrity was never seen thanks to the abrupt end to their season courtesy of COVID. Their 23-42 record by March 11th was technically 10th in the East in raw wins, but thanks to the Wizards playing 7 more games than Charlotte by the time the season ended, their 35.4% win percentage gave them the edge over the rest of the bottom-of-the-barrel teams in the East. Still, by a variety of metrics, you could make the argument that the Hornets may have been worse than anybody else in this tier, as their 106.3 offensive rating was the worst in the East and the second worst in the league, only behind the disaster that was the 2020 Warriors. And while their 113.3 defensive rating was slightly better and good enough to only place them 23rd in the league, their -7 net rating was the 4th worst in the NBA and a definitive piece of evidence that the team's mediocrity ran far deeper than we could ever imagine. But amongst all of their issues, the most consistent through line was the need for a point guard and speed in their play, as Charlotte ranked dead last in pace this season at a 95.8, a full 1.3 possessions less than the second-to-last team in the Denver Nuggets, and they were 24th in the league in turnovers per game at 15.1. These were all contributing factors to their long-standing mediocrity, and with a roster of scoring guards, fringe NBA-level wings, and no real leader, there was a good argument to be made that no team needed Lamelo in the draft more than the Charlotte Hornets. And as we all know, they got their guy with the 3rd pick, drafting the highly touted rookie into an organization which had been directionless for the latter half of the 2010s and hadn't seen the playoffs since 2016. But while the tides would eventually turn against Lamelo amidst Charlotte's continued mediocrity, he kicked off his rookie campaign with a bang, putting the league on notice that a new era of hoops for the Hornets had arrived. While his rookie averages of 15.7 points, 6.1 assists, and 5.9 rebounds on 43.6% from the field and 35.2% from 3 were enough to win him the Rookie of the Year award over Anthony Edwards, Lamelo's true impact came in the form of speeding up and helping to optimize Charlotte's offense in the half-court and especially in transition. While Charlotte would still find themselves toward the bottom of the league in pace, with their 98.3 possessions per game placing them just 21st in the NBA, Melo's minutes jump-started their offense, as while he was on the court, the Hornets' pace of play skyrocketed to a 103.35, which was 35th amongst all players in the league who played at least 50 games, and far and away the highest rate on the Hornets. Furthermore, Lamelo's 32.4% assist percentage was again easily the highest rate on Charlotte and good to place him in the 68th percentile amongst all guards this season. And while efficiency and turnovers were certainly a weak point for Lamelo on the whole this season, his lackluster shooting splits are largely skewed by his struggles in the final 10 games of the season where he returned from his wrist surgery. And prior to injuring himself, Lamelo's 38.9% from 3 and 39.9% from non-corner 3 specifically were good to place him in the 74th and 84th percentile respectively, and helped him to a 53.4% effective field goal percentage that placed him in the 65th percentile of all guards. Ultimately, Charlotte's new look was good enough to secure them the 10th seed and gave them a chance to compete for a playoff spot in the inaugural play-in tournament. But it was under the weight of playoff pressure and intensity that Charlotte completely crumbled, with their defense allowing a horrific 144 points to the Pacers en route to a 27-point loss that embarrassed the franchise and, as we'll come to see, helped set the stage for the loser perception that's followed LaMelo ever since. All in all though, while there were clear areas for growth in LaMelo's game, and he would have to cut down on the turnovers and become a more consistently efficient scorer, it was undeniable that the young guard had injected life into a franchise that had been without it for the better part of the last 10 years. And with Charlotte convinced that they had found their guard for the future, they shipped off Devontae Graham to clear up their guard room and drafted Kai Jones to develop as a modern lob threat alongside Melo, and brought in veterans Kelly Oubre Jr., Ish Smith, and Mason Plumlee to hopefully give the Rook more structure and stability to play within. And in the 2022 season, we watched as a slightly bolstered roster and a fully healthy LaMelo put the league on notice that the Hornets were as dangerous as ever. LaMelo's leap would be evident almost immediately in the 2022 season, as his averages of 20.1 points and 7.6 assists on 42.9% shooting and 38.9% from three on 7.5 attempts a game were clear evidence that the flashes he'd shown as a rookie were very real, and earned him his first All-Star selection of his career, making him the 4th youngest All-Star in league history. Through this campaign, the additions of veteran depth pieces paid dividends for Ball, whose usage rate skyrocketed to a 30.4% over the course of the season, and subsequently allowed Charlotte to fully embrace the youthful speed with which he played, as the Hornets' pace jumped to a 100.52, which tied them for 5th in the league and helped fully establish them in the Ball era. Charlotte's best offense came in transition when they were able to string together stops and capitalize on an admittedly poor defense, and despite their 113.1 defensive rating only placing them 23rd in the league, they ranked 3rd in points off turnovers at 18.6 a game, 2nd in fast break points at 16.3, and in particular, they were 2nd in the league in pace off a missed rim field goal attempt, which are among the most potent transition opportunities available in today's game. Charlotte's leap this year was felt team-wide, as they finished the year with a 113.6 offensive rating that placed them 8th in the NBA, and they were 3rd in assist percentage and 2nd in assist to turnover ratio at a 65.6 and 2.12 respectively, painting the picture of a young, hungry team whose up and down, exciting pace of play began with their sophomore guard and was infectious for the team. And this transition efficiency was paired with an elite shooting progression for LaMelo, whose cold end to his rookie year wore off completely as his overall three-point percentage jumped to 40% without heaves and placed him in the 85th percentile of all guards. Still, the year wasn't without challenges, and for as great as the Hornets were offensively, their struggles on defense remained a real problem, and with their 43-39 record once again being good enough to secure them a spot in the play-in, this was an early shot at redemption for Charlotte and a chance for the newly minted All-Star to prove that he was a winner on the biggest stage. But unfortunately, history repeated itself in the worst fashion, as Charlotte's playoff hopes were violently ended by an embarrassing play-in loss, this time at the hands of the Atlanta Hawks, whose 29-point victory forced Charlotte to shoot 37.8% from the field, LaMelo to put up a frigid 7 for 25 shooting performance, and reigning most improved player Miles Bridges to be ejected and launch his mouthpiece into the crowd. This second consecutive year of embarrassing loss, paired with the already immature reputation Ball had carried into the league and the Hornets' status as a franchise that had been incapable of competing for the last decade, came together to form one of the most unique situations in the league for the franchise and for the perception of Ball. While it is true that the team's defensive shortcomings had become an unignorable issue that had completely derailed their previous 2 shots at the playoffs, it was equally true that the addition of Ball and the evolution of Miles Bridges into an MIP candidate had brought Charlotte closer to the playoff picture than they'd ever been in recent memory. But the positives of a season like 2022 are ultimately ignored when you lose in such an embarrassing fashion. And as we'll soon see, this loss and the off-court troubles that the franchise would go on to suffer would never truly fade from the public's perception of the Hornets or Ball. These troubles would begin immediately during that offseason, as Miles Bridges would end up facing domestic abuse charges that would leave him unsigned for the time being and take away a major part of the Hornets' explosive offensive approach. And while the team would seemingly take a step in the right direction by firing James Borrego to bring back Steve Clifford, who was a more defensively oriented coach, they utterly failed to make any moves to bring defensive depth to the team. with the drafting of Mark Williams being the only addition of note, in the front office choosing to rely on the development of young players like Ball, James Bouknight, and Kai Jones to hopefully help them take that next step. But when the season began, the Hornets' misfortunes would compound, as after missing the first 13 games of the year with an ankle injury, Lamelo would play just 3 more games before re-injuring the same ankle while trying to save a ball from going out of bounds, keeping him out for the next 11 games. But when he returned, for the briefest moment, it looked as though he'd pick up right where he left off during his All-Star campaign, averaging 23.6 points and 6.7 assists on 41% shooting from the field and 38.2% shooting from 3 on an unreal 10.6 attempts a game. Impressive numbers which took an even bigger leap over his final 5 games of the season from February 13th to the 27th, where LaMelo's 25.4 points, 10.2 assists, 8.2 rebounds on 46.4% from the field and 47.4% from 3 not only led the Hornets to a 5-game winning streak, but placed him in the 94th percentile of all 3-point shooters, 75th percentile of effective field goal percentage, and the 94th percentile of point guards in defensive rebounding percentage, with only Luka Doncic pulling down more boards than him over this span. Unfortunately, in the midst of this promising run, LaMelo was once again thwarted by injury, this time breaking his right ankle and ending his season at just 36 games, adding to an already troubling injury history that dated back to his rookie season and fully granting Ball the tag of being injury prone. By this point, 3 years into the Lamelo Ball era, a clear pattern of issues revolving around the culture of the Hornets and their on- and off-court immaturity had begun to emerge, with the legal troubles of Bridges and Bouknight acting as an off-the-court reminder of the downsides of the youth-heavy approach that had made Charlotte so dangerous on the court. And during his 2023 post-draft presser, GM Mitch Kupchak gave some very revealing comments about the state of Charlotte's roster and their need for veteran leadership to grow the team, telling reporters, quote, "I'm not sure if we have that leader, that one veteran. I think you can look at a couple guys on our team and you might say in a year or 2, they'll grow into being leaders. But we don't have that one person. For the last couple years, it's fallen to the coach to be the leader. We're looking for someone in the locker room that can fill that role. The best thing to do is get a player that's going to be your leader. And right now, that's one thing where we have a couple guys who are growing in the right direction, and maybe this is the year they emerge, but we don't have that person right now." Kupchak's comments again represent the clear maturity and leadership issue that had persisted in Charlotte since the time of Ball's drafting to the organization, and led to such embarrassing play-in losses and off-court controversies over the past several years for the franchise. And while it would be great to draft a point guard who already had the off-court leadership chops and maturity to lead your team into a new era, the reality is nobody learns how to lead and win on their own. And the lack of solid veteran leadership pieces and failure to shore up key defensive weak points at the rim and on the wing were just as integral to the Hornets' failure as the constant injuries to Ball. Nonetheless, the 2023 offseason was an equally mixed bag of positives and negatives, as while they did manage to grow through the draft by bringing in Brandon Miller with the 2nd pick, who promised to be the 2 guard to grow alongside Melo, they also saw the public implosion of Kai Jones, whose erratic behavior on social media culminated in a trade request that brought yet another public scandal to the franchise and added to the mounting list of controversies they'd faced in the Ball era. Fortunately, the 2023-24 season looked to be yet another breakout campaign for LaMelo, as he got out to a scorching hot start to the tune of 25.9 points and 8.6 assists on 44.2% from the field and 38.9% from 3 to go along with 1.5 steals in a start that looked to have re-energized Charlotte despite their 5-9 start to the season. But of course, as the pattern of LaMelo and Charlotte dictates, no good thing can last too long. So once again, in just his 15th game of the season, he'd injure that right ankle, which would effectively lead to him missing the remainder of the season, save for a few spotty appearances in mid to late January. By this point, the Hornets had been without their star for more time than he'd been with them, and Clifford's consistent failure to perform defensively with his underdeveloped roster had been on full display in their 20th and 29th ranked defenses over the 2 years he'd been head coach. And thus, at the end of the 2024 campaign, Clifford stepped down from his position as the team opted to hire Charles Lee, whose reputation as a defensively minded players coach would hopefully change the fortunes of the franchise. On top of this, in spite of Kupchak's comments about a lack of veteran leadership, Charlotte made moves to acquire more draft capital and brought in a host of league vets like Reggie Jackson, Seth Curry, and later down the line, Yusuf Nurkic, who all very clearly had temporary roles on the team without appearing to want to have any long-term impact on the team's culture and need for leadership. So once again, the season would begin with an explosive Lamelo start and some promising shifts in Charlotte's approach, as Ball would average 31.1 points and 6.9 assists on 43% shooting from the field and 35.6% from three, while taking an unreal 13.1 attempts a game. Over the first 18 games Lamelo was on his heater, he found himself in his own stratosphere in terms of importance to his team's offensive production, boasting a 40.2% usage rate that was top of the league and similarly finishing in the 88th percentile of point guards over this span and assist percentage at a 39.1%. But Ball's explosive box score numbers and highlight-heavy performances didn't translate to winning, and his explosive numbers only begin to look more like a necessity when you consider the Hornets still only ranked 26th in offensive rating over this span, despite having one of the hottest offensive engines in the league at that point. And oftentimes through this stretch, Ball would be the only player managing to have a significant impact in the box score, as players like Bridges, Miller, and Trey Mann all got off to slow starts. And though the team did surround Lamelo with a series of spot-up shooters, and they managed to finish the 2025 season ranked third in spot-up points per 100 possessions at 1.19, their defensive identity continued to be a struggle under Charles Lee, with them finishing 24th in defensive rating at a 115.7. And it's of course no surprise that this season too featured a series of injuries to Ball, Miller, and Mann that further hampered an already struggling team who couldn't manage to string together consistent offense without any half-court options or floor generals to create for them. So as the 2025 season came and went, and Ball again found himself unable to play 50 games as the Hornets continued to underachieve, the playoff debut of a Cade Cunningham, who'd been in similar losing situations to Ball, only worsened the scrutiny of the perpetually injured and perpetually losing star guard in Charlotte. And to begin the 2025-26 season, it once again appears that we've begun to see the same pattern play out, as a healthy Lamelo has again jumped out to a hot start, showcasing the flash and offensive prowess that made him such a touted prospect to begin with. Yet Charlotte's porous defense and early season struggles in the win column have once again reignited the claims of Ball himself being the root of Charlotte's failure, and receiving the infamous label of a loser from fans, commentators, and even NBA legends like Robert Horry. But as we've seen throughout this video, in the course of his career, the story of Lamelo in Charlotte is always only told through half-truths and hot takes that lack proper context. From the time he entered the league, he was given the Herculean task of transforming the fortunes of a franchise that had wallowed in mediocrity for the better part of the last half-decade. And yet, when he was able to be on the floor, it was clear as day how effective and important he was to shifting their offensive approach, with the team seemingly overnight taking on his personality and playstyle on the court, bringing excitement and some level of hope about the future of the team. And while early season losses in the play-in tournament and a failure to meaningfully develop on defense in spite of his 6'7" frame have admittedly remained holes in Ball's game and allowed him to reflect the general issues that the Hornets have faced through his tenure, these flaws have unrightfully been latched onto by critics who had their minds made up about the point guard's playstyle since he was in high school. And thus, no matter how many hot starts he gets out to and how many advanced metrics point to his positive impacts, the fact remains that the indecisiveness of the Hornets front office, multiple misses in the draft on players who were supposed to help usher them into the future, and a heaping dose of ankle injuries have all been ignored by national media pundits in favor of the headline-grabbing title of loser for Lamelo Ball. If you want to say that he's injury prone and his inability to stay on the court has impacted his team's ability to win, or that his loose personality that helps supercharge a meandering Hornets offense can lead to unnecessary turnovers while trying to play with speed, or even say that Ball's lackluster output on the defensive end can sometimes similarly impact the team, these are all valid takes that deserve to be engaged with at least on some level. But to label a player who's either been too injured to compete when it matters most, or a victim of one of the most dysfunctional organizations of the modern era as being quote-unquote not a winner, is biased, reductive, and most importantly, just a lazy analysis of the past 6 seasons of his career. So hopefully this season, though it looks unlikely, Charlotte can at least manage to stay healthy enough to find a way to make a meaningful push to return to the playoff picture. Because otherwise, we're all in for another year of the Lamelo Ball cycle. But with all that being said, that's going to do it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed, and hopefully I can catch you in the next one.